She stood on the rain-slicked pavement, the flimsy cardboard box in her hands dissolving, holding the last pieces of her life. The divorce was final. Her husband of 10 years, Medette, had taken the house, the savings, and her dignity, leaving her with nothing but a bitter laugh and the words, "You'll be on the street in a week." As the cold Seattle rain soaked her to the bone, she believed him. Her car wouldn't start. She was well and truly broken. Then a silent, impossibly black Bentley Arnage glided to the curb. The rear window lowered, and a face she hadn't seen in 15 years looked out. He opened the car door, and in a voice that held the entire world, he said, "Welcome home." The gavel strike was a dull, final thud in the sterile air of courtroom 3B. It was the sound of a door locking, the sound of an ending. Bella Sterling, no Bella Hayes again. She had to remember that kept her spine perfectly straight. She stared at the wood grain on the table in front of her, tracing a knot in the varnish with her eyes, refusing to give her ex-husband the satisfaction of her tears. "The dissolution is granted," said Judge Miller, his voice a monotone drone. "Assets to be divided as per the post-nuptial agreement, Exhibit B." Bella's lawyer, a young, exhausted public defender named Sarah, placed a hand gently on her arm. Bella had no money for a high-powered attorney. Medette, of course, had the best that Covington and Burling had to offer. Exhibit B. Bella thought the bile rising in her throat. The agreement she'd signed 3 years ago when Medette had first been promoted to vice president at Sterling Financial. She'd been so proud of him, so trusting. He'd called it housekeeping, a formality to protect our future. She didn't read the fine print. She didn't see the clause that voided her claim to his burgeoning portfolio if the marriage ended for any reason. The any reason, it turned out, was named Chloe. His 24-year-old assistant, all sharp angles and sharper ambition. Medette stood up, buttoning his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit. He adjusted his cufflinks, a smirk playing on his perfectly handsome face. He leaned over to his lawyer, whispered something, and they both shared a low chuckle. He didn't even look at Bella. Why would he? She was a discarded object. Bella had met Medette when she was 22, a promising graduate from the Rhode Island School of Design. Her portfolio in sustainable architecture and interior design had been called prodigious. Then Medette came along. He was charming, driven, and intoxicating. He loved her creativity, he said. But after the wedding, creativity became a cute hobby. Her design work became clutter. Her dreams of starting her own firm were unrealistic and financially irresponsible. "I make enough for both of us, Ellie," he'd said, the pet name becoming a tool of control. "Why don't you focus on us, on making our home a sanctuary?" So she had. She'd put her portfolios in the attic where they gathered dust. She'd designed his sanctuary, a cold minimalist mansion in Medina, hosted his partners, and slowly, piece by piece, erased herself. The last memory of that life, the one that finally broke her, wasn't even the discovery. It was the sound of the discovery. She'd come home early from a charity luncheon holding a small framed sketch she'd done, the first creative thing she'd made in years. She was going to surprise him. She heard laughter from the master bedroom. Not just any laughter. A high-pitched performative giggle that wasn't hers. She'd pushed the door open. Chloe, wearing Bella's own silk robe, was perched on the edge of their bed. Medette was standing by the window, a glass of scotch in hand. They weren't even startled. They just looked at her, as if she were the one who was interrupting. "Bella," Medette had said, his voice flat, annoyed. "You're early." The little sketch had slipped from her fingers, the glass shattering on the hardwood floor. "Oh, good," Chloe had said, looking at the broken frame. "She broke something. You said she was clumsy." That was 6 months ago. 6 months of legal hell where Medette's lawyers painted her as an unstable, artistically tempered gold digger, while Medette himself cried poverty to the court, hiding assets and offshore accounts Bella couldn't prove existed. She stood up. The courtroom was emptying. Medette and his team were already out the door, probably heading to Canlis for a champagne lunch. Sarah, her lawyer, looked at her with pity. "Do you have somewhere to go?" "The motel?" I'll be fine. Bella lied, her voice hoarse. I have my car. She walked out of the King County Courthouse into a wall of gray. The Seattle sky had opened up a torrential, biting cold October downpour. She had one suitcase and a single cardboard box filled with the few personal items Medette's lawyers hadn't contested: old journals, her dusty portfolios, and a small faded photograph of a treehouse. She'd been staying at a grim motel near the airport. Her 15-year-old Honda Civic, the one she'd had since college, was parked 2 blocks away. Medett had graciously let her keep it. By the time she reached the car, the cardboard box was sagging, its contents damp. She fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking from cold and adrenaline. She put the key in the lock, turned it. Click. She tried again. Click. Click. The battery was dead. Of course it was. It was the universe's final cruel joke. Bella Hayes, 32 years old. A graduate of RISD and ex-wife, stood in the pouring rain, leaning her forehead against the cold, wet glass of her dead car. The box in her arms finally gave way, spilling her life onto the wet pavement. Old sketches, her most private dreams, were now just soggy pulp. A sob, hot and raw, finally tore itself from her throat. She sank to her knees on the sidewalk, defeated. Medett was right. She had nothing. She was nothing. A shadow fell over her. She didn't look up, assuming it was a passerby. Then a low, powerful rumble cut through the sound of the rain. A car engine that didn't sputter but purred. A long, impossibly black Bentley. Arnage, a car that looked more like a block of polished obsidian than a vehicle, had pulled up beside her. It was so close its tires were almost touching the curb. She shielded her eyes from the rain. The rear window, tinted to an impenetrable black, glided down with perfect, expensive silence. Inside, a man was looking at her. He wasn't smiling. His face was all sharp angles and intense dark eyes. He looked like he'd been carved from marble. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car, even when it was new. For a second she thought he was one of Medette's associates come to gloat. But then his eyes, which had been scanning her with a look of pained recognition, met hers. "Bella," he asked. The voice. It wasn't the man's voice. It was the boy's. A voice she hadn't heard in 15 years now, wrapped in steel and power. "Ellie." She could only stare, rain and tears mixing on her face. Justin Thorne. Her childhood neighbor. Her best friend. The boy who'd helped her build that treehouse. The boy who had vanished overnight when they were both 17. He didn't say anything else. The driver's door opened and the bodyguard stepped out, unfurling a massive black umbrella. But Justin was already moving. He opened his own door and stepped out into the deluge, his polished leather shoes sinking into a puddle. He walked around the car, his eyes never leaving her face. He crouched in front of her, the rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He looked at the ruined box, the soggy sketches, and then back at her. His expression was unreadable, a thunderstorm of emotions. He simply held out his hand. "We're leaving." My car," she stammered, gesturing uselessly. "Forget the car," he said. His bodyguard was already picking up her suitcase. Justin himself began gathering the soaked sketches, handling them with a strange reverence as if they were priceless artifacts. "Justin, I can't," she whispered. "You don't understand. I have nothing." "You have me," he said, as if it were the simplest fact in the world. He stood and gently, firmly pulled her to her feet. He guided her to the open rear door of the Bentley. The interior smelled of rich leather and something clean and expensive. She hesitated at the threshold, a woman in a $50 dress from Target dripping rainwater onto the plush lamb's wool carpet of a $500,000 car. Justin put his hand on the small of her back, a gesture both protective and commanding. "Get in, Ellie," he said, his voice softer now. He leaned in, and his next words seemed to come from a dream, from a life she'd forgotten she ever had. "Welcome home." The ride was silent, but it was a silence thick with 1,000 unasked questions. Bella sat on the soft leather, shivering, acutely aware of the puddle forming at her feet. The bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Stone, sat in the front passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Justin sat beside her, not touching her, but his presence was a tangible heat. He'd taken off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was heavy, lined with silk, and smelled like him, that clean, expensive scent she couldn't place, mixed with the faint metallic smell of rain. He had her ruined sketches in his lap. He was looking at one, a drawing of a cantilevered house emerging from a cliffside. "You never stopped," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Justin, where are we going?" she finally managed to ask. Her voice was a reedy whisper. "What are you? How did you—" "We're going somewhere safe," he said, his dark eyes finally lifting to meet hers. The intensity was startling. This wasn't the lanky, laughing boy who'd shared cherry cokes with her. This was a man who commanded. "How did I find you? I've been looking for you, Ellie, for a long time." "Looking for me? Why?" "Because," he said, and a flicker of the old Justin, the vulnerable one, passed through his eyes. "I never finished our conversation." She had no idea what that meant. Their last conversation had been 15 years ago, a rushed, whispered argument by their shared fence line. He'd been upset, distant. He said his family was having some trouble. The next morning his house was empty. The bank had foreclosed. No note, no goodbye. The Bentley glided through the streets of downtown Seattle and didn't stop. It headed to the most exclusive, newest building on the skyline, a shimmering glass spire that pierced the clouds. It was called Ethelgard, a name that dripped with old money and new tech. The car didn't stop at the curb. It descended into a private, silent underground garage. The garage was empty save for two other cars that looked just as expensive as the Bentley. They parked and Justin led her to a private elevator. He pressed his thumb to a biometric scanner. The elevator doors opened with a soft hiss. "Justin, what is this place?" she asked, clutching his jacket tighter. I can't pay for any of this. You need to understand. Medette, he took everything. I have $400 in my checking account." Justin's jaw tightened at the mention of Medette's name. "The only thing you need to understand is that his name is the last thing you ever need to worry about, and you will never pay for anything again." "No," Bella said, stopping at the elevator door. The old fear, the fear of being controlled, of being a possession, rose up. "I can't. I just got out of one cage, Justin. I can't walk into another one even if it's gilded." He looked at her and his expression softened. "Ellie, do you trust me?" I don't know you. Not anymore." "Fair," he said with a nod. "Then trust her." He tapped his temple. "Trust the girl who knew me before all of—" He gestured at the car, the garage. "This. I am not Medette Sterling." He said the name like it was a disease. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. Bella's breath caught. It wasn't an apartment. It was the sky. They were in a 2-story penthouse. The entire western-facing wall was a solid sheet of glass 30 feet high, looking out over the entirety of Puget Sound. The rain had momentarily stopped and the clouds were breaking, revealing the jagged, snow-capped line of the Olympic Mountains. The space was enormous, but unlike Medette's cold mansion, this was warm. The floors were dark, rich walnut. A massive, live-edge oak table sat in a dining area. A sleek, modern kitchen with matte black fixtures sat to the left. But the centerpiece was a cavernous living area with a simple, massive fireplace, and in the corner a beautiful professional-grade drafting table and art station. "Justin, this is your home. It's breathtaking." "It's not my home, Ellie," he said, walking toward the art station. He ran his hand over the clean, untouched wood of the drafting table. "Then, whose is it?" He turned to her. "It's yours." Bella laughed a short, hysterical sound. "That's not funny. Please just take me to a shelter or a bus station. I'll figure it out." "I bought it 2 years ago," he said, ignoring her. I've been renovating it. He walked to a sleek digital panel on the wall. I kept trying to figure out what was missing. It felt empty. Then 6 months ago I heard a rumor. A rumor that Medit Sterling's wife was unhappy, that he was a brute. His voice was cold. So I started looking. I found a photo of you at a gala. It was you. You still had the same sad eyes you had the day before I left. He'd been stalking her. The fear came back colder this time. He saw it in her face. No, Ellie, not like that. I was just making sure you were okay. And when I found out you weren't, I started building. He tapped the screen. A section of the wall which had looked like a solid panel of dark wood slid open with a pneumatic hiss. It was a full design studio. Shelves were filled with pristine art supplies, 3D printers, and model-making tools. And on the wall, Bella felt her knees go weak. On the wall, framed and beautifully lit, were her sketches. Not the soggy ones from the box. Dozens of them. Her college portfolio. Her post-grad projects. The prodigious work she thought was lost forever. How? She whispered, walking toward them, her hand outstretched. Your mother, Justin said softly. I found her in Arizona 10 years ago. She'd kept everything. She passed away, Ellie, 5 years ago. I'm so sorry. She left all of this for you in my care. She always hoped I'd find you again. Bella touched the frame of her thesis project, a design for a self-sustaining artists' community. She hadn't seen it in a decade. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they weren't for Medit. They were for her mother, for the girl she used to be. I can't accept this, Justin, she said, her voice thick. It's too much. It's not a gift, he said, and his voice shifted. It became the voice of the CEO. It's an offer. Thorn Industries is launching a new division, Thorn Sustainable Futures. I'm building entire communities, Ellie, not just glass towers. I need a head of design. I need someone who can design homes that are also art. I need someone who sees the world the way you do. He walked to the drafting table. I had this all installed last week. The job is yours. The salary is significant. This penthouse is the standard executive housing package for C-suite employees. He was giving her an out, a way to accept this with her dignity intact. He wasn't giving her a gilded cage. He was giving her a job. A life. You haven't even seen my work in 15 years, she argued weakly. What if I'm no good anymore? Justin picked up the soggy, ruined sketch he'd rescued from the street, the one of the cantilevered house. He smoothed it out on the table. You drew this today, he said, in the middle of your life falling apart. You're better than you were. He didn't break you, Ellie. He just paused you. She looked at him, this man who was a stranger and yet knew her better than anyone. She looked at the studio, at the view, at the life he was holding out to her. Where do you live? She asked. Justin smiled, a true warm smile that finally reached his eyes. It was the smile of the boy in the treehouse. He pointed to the ceiling. I bought the penthouse above this one. Figured you might need a neighbor. And, he added, tapping the ruined sketch, I want to talk about this cliffside house. I have the perfect location for it. Bella looked down at her work, truly seeing it for the first time. She took a deep breath, the first one that didn't hurt. Okay, she said. When do I start? The first month was a blur of exhilarating, terrifying adjustment. Bella dove into the work at Thorn Industries with a ferocity that surprised even herself. The pause Justin had spoken of wasn't a pause, it was a dam. And now it had broken. The penthouse, which she'd officially accepted as part of her executive compensation package, quickly became her sanctuary. She spent her days at the Thorne Industries headquarters in downtown Seattle, a marvel of living walls and reclaimed timber that she'd instantly fallen in love with. Her nights were spent in her own studio sketching, designing, and breathing life back into the woman she had locked away. Justin was true to his word. He was first and foremost her boss. He was demanding, brilliant, and had impossibly high standards. He treated her with a deep professional respect that was more intoxicating than any shallow flattery Medette had ever given her. He challenged her ideas, pushed her to be bolder, and celebrated her wins. Her first project was the redesign of a failing commercial park in Portland, Oregon. She scrapped the entire plan and proposed a mixed-use urban village centered around a massive public greenhouse and water reclamation system. It was ambitious, it was expensive, and Justin had approved it in a single meeting. But underneath the CEO, the boy from the treehouse was always there. He knew without asking that she hated coffee but loved black tea with honey. A mug of it would be sitting on her desk every morning. He learned that the stress of her old life made her forget to eat, so he'd accidentally order too much food for lunch meetings, always her favorites. And they talked. Not about Medette. That name was a void they both silently agreed not to enter. They talked about the past. One night they were working late in her penthouse studio finalizing the blueprints for the Portland project. "Why did you leave?" Bella asked suddenly, her pencil hovering over a sketch. Justin, who was leaning against the drafting table, went very still. "I told you, my father. You said it was trouble. You didn't say he'd been embezzling from his partners." Justin looked at her, his face a mask. "I had my PIs look into you, Ellie. Did you think you couldn't look into me?" She pulled up a news article on her tablet. "Robert Thorne, disgraced developer, avoids prison in plea deal. Family relocates." It was dated 15 years ago. "We lost everything," Justin said, his voice quiet, turning to look out at the city lights. "The house, the cars, my college fund. We left in the middle of the night. We moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Reno. My father, he couldn't handle the shame. He started drinking. He died 3 years later. Justin, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you call me? Write me anything. And say what?" He shot back a flash of anger, not at her, but at the past hardening his voice. "Say, 'Hi, Ellie, my father's a thief and I'm a busboy at a casino.' Say, 'I can't stop thinking about you, but I have absolutely nothing to offer you but my family's shame.'" He took a breath, calming himself. "I watched you. From a distance. On social media before you deleted it. I saw you graduate. I saw you get your first internship. And then I saw you get engaged to Medette Sterling." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a 15-year-old pain. "He was everything I wasn't. Rich, established, from a good family. I thought he'd make you happy. So I stayed away." "He was a monster," Bella whispered. "I know that now," Justin said, his voice raw. "I started building. I went to night school, got a degree in computer science, wrote a piece of code for logistics software. It sold. I used that money to buy one building, then another. Then I built Thorne Industries from the ground up, all with one goal." "What goal?" "To be the kind of man who could at least stand in the same room as you." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "By the time I came back to Seattle, and you were still married, so I waited. I told myself if he ever hurt you, I'd be ready." The air in the studio was electric. This wasn't a boss and his employee. This was a man confessing a lifetime of devotion. "Justin?" she started. Before she could finish, her personal phone, a new one Justin's security had given her, buzzed on the table. She'd blocked Medette on everything, but this was an unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. A text message. "You can't hide in his glass tower forever, Bella. You think you're so much better than me." Another text. It was a picture. It was her walking into the Thorne building that morning. Taken from across the street. "He'll get tired of you just like I did. But I'm not done with you. You owe me." A cold dread, a feeling she thought she'd left in that courtroom, flooded her body. She must have gone pale because Justin was instantly at her side. "What is it? Ellie, what's wrong?" She showed him the phone. Justin's face, which had been so open and vulnerable, transformed. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, dangerous fury that was terrifying to behold. He didn't speak. He simply took out his own phone and dialed Stone, his head of security. "He's watching her," Justin said, his voice lethally calm. "Find him. Get a restraining order. And find out everything he's hiding. I want to know where he gets his dry cleaning. I want to know how much he tips for coffee. I want to know everything." He hung up and looked at her. "He will never ever get near you again. I promise you that." But Bella knew Medette. His pride was a venomous living thing. He wouldn't just be scared off by a bodyguard. He'd lost his wife, he'd lost his control, and now he was seeing her succeed on a level he could only dream of. This wasn't an ending. It was a new, uglier beginning. "Justin," she said, her voice shaking, "you don't know what he's capable of." "No, Ellie," Justin replied, his hand resting on her shoulder, a solid, grounding weight. "He doesn't know what I'm capable of." 3 months later, Bella was on the cover of Forbes, not as a billionaire's girlfriend, but as the vision of tomorrow. The Portland Urban Village project had broken ground and was being hailed by critics as a masterpiece of sustainable design. Bella Hayes was the new star of the architectural world. She was giving interviews, guest lecturing at the University of Washington, and for the first time in her life, she was truly happy. Her relationship with Justin had settled into a deep, unspoken bond. He was her champion, her confidant, and her best friend all over again. The physical line between them was taut, uncrossed. He hadn't kissed her. He hadn't pushed. He was, as he'd promised, letting her lead. He was giving her space to heal, to become herself. And the more space he gave her, the more she found herself wanting to close the distance. Medette had been silent. The restraining order had been served, and Justin's security team was a subtle but constant presence. Bella had almost convinced herself he'd moved on, slinking away in defeat. She had forgotten, however, that Medette Sterling's greatest talent was public humiliation. The invitation was for the Seattle Art Museum's annual gala. Thorne Industries was the primary sponsor. It was in effect Bella's coming-out party. It was the first time she would be publicly celebrated for her work. She spent weeks on her dress, not buying one, but designing it. It was a deep emerald green silk with a structured architectural bodice that echoed her design principles. When she met Justin at the private elevator, he simply stopped. He was in a flawless custom tuxedo, but his eyes were only on her. "Ellie," he breathed, "you are everything." The gala was a glittering affair. The main hall of the museum was filled with Seattle's elite old money tech titans and politicians. Bella was nervous, but Justin kept her anchored. He'd hold her elbow, murmur a name in her ear, and flawlessly guide her through the social maze. She was in the middle of a conversation with the mayor when she felt a chill, the kind of dread that prickles on the back of your neck. She turned. Standing by the entrance, a flute of champagne in his hand, was Medette. He wasn't alone. On his arm, dripping in diamonds and a skin-tight red dress, was Chloe. "Justin," Bella whispered, her hand tightening on his arm. Justin's head snapped toward the door. His smile evaporated. "Stone," he said into his sleeve. "He's here. How?" Medette raised his glass to her, a mocking toast. He'd gotten a ticket. He must have bought a table just for this. Just for her. "It's okay," she said, trying to control her breathing. "He can't do anything. He's just looking." "Don't let him ruin your night, Ellie. He's irrelevant." The main presentation began. The museum director took the stage, followed by Justin, who gave a speech about the importance of art in public spaces. And then he introduced Bella. "Thorne Industries is built on finding the future," he said, his voice ringing with pride, his eyes finding her in the crowd. "But I was lucky. Our new head of design. The visionary behind the Portland project is also my oldest friend. Please welcome Bella Hayes." The room erupted in applause. Bella walked toward the stage, her heart soaring. She was doing it. She was here. She took the microphone. "Thank you, Justin. Thank you to the museum." "A round of applause, everyone." A new voice, sharp and laced with sarcasm, cut through the room. Medet was walking toward the stage, his glass held high. Chloe followed, filming on her phone. "Let's hear it for Bella Sterling, my talented, talented wife." The room went silent. People looked confused. "Ex-wife Medet," Bella said, her voice shaking but firm. "You're not welcome here." "Oh, but I'm a patron," Medet said, feigning surprise. "And I'm just so proud. I mean, I always knew she had it in her. After all, I'm the one who paid for all her little hobbies." Justin was off the stage in a second. "Stone, get him out. Now." "Don't touch me," Medet shouted, backing away as security approached. "I have a right to be here. I have a right to congratulate my wife on her success." He made air quotes. "Success she built on my money, on ideas she had in my house." This was his plan. Not a physical attack, but a public assassination of her character. "You're pathetic, Medet," Justin said, his voice a low growl. "Am I?" Medet laughed. "Ask her. Ask her where she got the inspiration for her precious urban village. Go on, Ellie, tell them." Bella felt the blood drain from her face. "I see you remember," Medet sneered. "Those little sketches you used to cry over, the ones you said were your life's work, the ones I paid for you to make while you lived in my house eating my food." He was talking about her college thesis, the artist's community. The Portland Project was an evolution of that. He was claiming it. "He's lying," Bella said, but her voice was drowned out by the gasps. "Am I?" Medet pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He held it up. It was one of her old sketches. "This looked familiar. It's from 2019, during our marriage. Funny, it looks exactly like the blueprints for the Portland Project." He was mixing truths and lies. The sketch was old, but the idea was hers from long before she'd met him. "You're a fraud, Bella," Medet spat. "You're a common thief. And you," he said, pointing at Justin, "you're sleeping with her, so you're just as bad." "That's enough." Justin lunged, but Stone held him back. A woman from the Seattle Times was scribbling furiously. Cameras were flashing. This was a disaster. "In fact," Medet called out, his voice gleeful, "I'm just protecting my own interests. My lawyers will be in touch, Bella. We'll be filing an injunction on the Portland Project, and a lawsuit, for intellectual property theft. I'll see you in court, again." He tossed the sketch onto the stage. It landed at her feet. Security grabbed him, but the damage was done. He and Chloe were laughing as they were dragged out. He planned this," Bella whispered, staring at the sketch. Her night, her triumph. He'd poisoned all of it. She looked out at the sea of faces. They weren't admiring. They were suspicious. They were judging. She was once again the center of a scandal. She turned and ran. She fled the stage, pushing past Justin, and ran out of the gala, out into the cold night air, her beautiful self-designed dress feeling like a costume for a fool. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The next morning, the Seattle Times headline read, "Gala Scandal Thorne, Visionary Accused of Theft by Ex-Husband." The Thorne Industries Board was in a panic. The Portland Project was stalled pending the injunction. Bella, hiding in her penthouse, refused to see anyone. She'd turned off her phone. She sat in her beautiful studio, staring at the walls, which now felt like a prison. He'd done it. Medet had found a way to take her work, her one last piece of herself, and taint it. She was sketching idly, her mind numb, when her private elevator dinged. She hadn't buzzed anyone in. The doors opened, and Justin strode in. He wasn't in a suit. He was in jeans and a dark Henley, and he looked like he hadn't slept. "He has access to your private elevator," she stated, her voice dead. "He had—" Justin corrected, his voice tight. "The codes are changed. Stone's entire team has been restructured. I'm sorry, Ellie. I let this happen. I underestimated his depravity. It's not your fault, she whispered. He's right. Justin stopped. What? He's right. The Portland design. It's based on my thesis, my work from college, but I did refine it while I was married to him. I sketched in notebooks, I journaled. He must have found them. He must have kept them. Ellie listened to me. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, forcing her to look at him. He's not claiming you refined them. He's claiming he gave you the ideas. He's claiming it's his intellectual property. And I can't prove it isn't, she cried, the tears finally coming. It's my word against his. He's got my notebooks from that time. He'll say we collaborated. Who will they believe, the successful established financial VP or the unstable ex-wife who was rescued by a billionaire? They'll believe us, Justin said, his voice pure steel, because we're going to destroy him. Our legal team is already filing a countersuit for defamation and filing to have his injunction thrown out, but they need ammunition. He has my notebooks, Justin. He has my sketches. Yes, Justin said, standing up. He has your sketches. He doesn't have mine. Bella looked at him confused. Yours? Justin walked to a bookcase in his living room, a part of the penthouse she rarely entered. He pulled a thick leather-bound book from the shelf. He walked back and placed it on her drafting table. Your mother gave me these too, he said softly. She kept more than just your college portfolios. Bella opened the book. It was a scrapbook, and inside on faded, yellowed paper were drawings. A drawing of a birdhouse dated when she was 9. A sketch of their treehouse with "Top Secret" written in crayon. And then she saw it. A detailed, complex drawing of a city in a garden. A multi-level structure with waterfalls, glass domes, and living walls. It was a child's fantasy, but the DNA of the Portland project was undeniably there. At the bottom in her childish cursive it was dated, July 19th, 2008, age 15, long before she'd ever heard the name Maida Sterling. Justin, she breathed, tracing the old pencil lines. There's more, he said. He turned the page. It was a letter from her, addressed to him. It had been tucked into the book. Dear Justin, I'm hiding this in the treehouse. It's the plans for our future. This is the city we'll build one day when we're grown-ups. It's our special project. Don't show anyone, love, Ellie. My mother must have found it when they cleaned out the treehouse, Bella whispered, her hands shaking. He's claiming the ideas from 2019, Justin said, his voice grim. This proves the concept is yours from more than a decade earlier. This kills his entire claim. This is the silver bullet. Bella felt a rush of adrenaline, of hope. We have him. We have part of him, Justin said. This proves the idea is yours. But he can still argue the execution was marital property. It's not enough to just win, Ellie. I want to end him. He began to pace. My legal team is good, but Sterling is slippery. He's hidden his assets. He's clean. No, he's not, Bella said, thinking back. He was careless. He used to brag about creative accounting, about his firewalls. He had a second laptop, a personal one. He kept it in his home office safe. He said it was his real brain. Justin stopped pacing. A second laptop. Where is it now? It would be at the house. The Medina house. The one he got in the divorce. That's a fortress, Ellie. We can't just walk in. I can, she said. Justin looked at her. Absolutely not. It's a violation of the restraining order. He'd have you arrested. He's not there, Bella said, her mind racing. Chloe. She's been posting on Instagram. She's in Cabo, on his yacht. Look. She pulled up Chloe's public profile. There she was, champagne glass in hand, tagged at Cabo San Lucas. The post was from 1 hour ago. He's with her, Bella said. The house is empty. It's still insane, Justin argued. Is it I designed that house, Justin? I designed the security system. He never bothered to change the master codes. because he never ever thought I'd be smart enough or brave enough to use them. She looked him in the eye, the girl from the treehouse and the head of design merging into one. He has my notebooks. I'm going to get them. And while I'm there, she said, a cold smile touching her lips, I'm going to get that laptop. You're not going alone, Justin said. I have to. If you're seen, it's a different crime. I am just an ex-wife retrieving personal items. You're a rival CEO breaking and entering. I'm not dragging you down with me. She grabbed her keys. Just have Stone get me there. And have our lawyers ready. I'm going to war. The Medina house was dark. It sat on the edge of Lake Washington, a monument of glass and steel that had once been her prison. Stone, Justin's bodyguard, idled the car at the end of the private drive, hidden by a grove of fir trees. You have 5 minutes, Ms. Hayes, Stone said, his voice tense. Justin's orders. After that, I'm coming in. You won't have to, Bella said. She slipped out of the car, a small, dark figure in the night. The code for the gate was her mother's birthday. 0416. It beeped green. He never changed it. The arrogance. The front door code was the date he'd been promoted to VP. 1102. It clicked open. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. It smelled of Chloe's cloying perfume. Her shoes were kicked off in the hallway. Clothes were draped over the furniture. The sterile sanctuary Bella had maintained was now a messy, lived-in space. She went straight to the home office. The safe was behind a minimalist painting just as she'd left it. The code was their anniversary. 0821. She cringed as she typed it. The safe hissed open. Inside was the laptop, and a stack of her moleskin notebooks. Her heart hammered. She grabbed them, stuffing them into the backpack she'd brought. She was about to close the safe when she saw a flash of red. It was a small velvet jewelry box. Not hers. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a gaudy, enormous diamond ring. A new one. An engagement ring. And under it, a sticky note. Property of C. Jensen. Can't wait to be Mrs. Sterling. He was going to marry her. The thought was so absurd Bella almost laughed. He's not going to marry you, sweetie. Bella froze. The blood turned to ice in her veins. She turned around slowly. Chloe was standing in the doorway. She wasn't in Cabo. She was in a silk robe, another one of Bella's, and she was holding a glass of wine. I saw the gate light flash on the security panel, Chloe said, taking a sip. I figured it was just Medette forgetting his keys. But this is so much better. Chloe, I'm just getting my things. Your things? Chloe laughed, a high, sharp sound. Looks like you're robbing the place. Medette is going to love this. He'll have you arrested. You'll lose everything. She raised her phone, ready to dial. He's not marrying you, Chloe, Bella said, her voice surprisingly steady. He's using you, just like he used me. Oh, please, spare me the wronged wife speech. He loves me. He's giving me everything he denied you. Is he? Bella said, holding up the ring box. Or is he just buying you off? You're his alibi for the gala. You're his witness for the lawsuit. You're a prop. The second you stop being useful, or the second you get wrinkles, he'll replace you, just like me. Chloe's smile faltered. A flicker of insecurity of truth passed through her eyes. He's a monster, Bella pressed, walking slowly toward her. He doesn't love you. He loves winning, and he's dragging you into his crime. When he goes down for this fraudulent lawsuit, you'll be an accomplice. He's not going to lose. Chloe spat, but her voice wavered. He is. I have proof the design was mine from before I ever met him. He's committing perjury, and you're helping. Chloe was quiet, her artfully manicured hand trembling. He's been different, Chloe whispered, her bravado crumbling. Since the gala, he's angry. All the time. He grabbed my arm last night, left a bruise. She touched her silk-covered bicep. Bella felt a sudden unwelcome pang of pity. That's how it starts, Chloe. A grab, then a shove, then worse. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to get my life back from the man who's destroying us both. Bella held out her hand. He's in Cabo, isn't he? But he left you here. Why to stand guard? You deserve better than being his watchdog. Chloe looked at the phone in her hand, then at Bella. She was a mean girl, ambitious and cruel, but she was also, Bella realized, just another victim in Medet's orbit. He's not in Cabo, Chloe said, her voice flat. He's at a meeting with his other offshore banker, a Mr. Haas. He's moving money, a lot of it. He said if this lawsuit doesn't pay out, we'll need a nest egg. He's running, Bella realized. He's embezzling. I heard him on the phone, Chloe said, the words spilling out. He's been siphoning from his clients' accounts, small amounts for years. He called it trimming the fat. That laptop, it's not just his brain, it's his ledger, all of it, every dime. This was bigger than a defamation suit. This was a federal crime. Help me, Chloe, Bella said. He's going to prison. You can either be the girl who went with him, or you can be the woman who helped put him away. Justin Thorne, my boss, he's a powerful man. He can protect you. He can give you a fresh start. Somewhere Medet can never find you. Chloe looked at the diamond ring in Bella's hand. Her face hardened. She wasn't a good person, but she was a practical one. He bragged, Chloe said, her voice low. After the gala. He was drunk. He said he was going to ruin you. He said she thinks she's so smart I'll own her. I'll tell them I gave her the ideas. She's nothing without me. Bella's blood ran cold. Did you record him? Chloe gave a slow, predatory smile. He always liked it when I filmed him. He's so vain. She took out her phone. She tapped a few buttons, and then she hit play. Medet's voice filled the room, drunk and slurring but unmistakable. Tell them I gave her the ideas. She's nothing. It was the smoking gun. A full confession. I'll text it to you, Chloe said. And I'll testify, in exchange for full immunity and a plane ticket to, say, Sydney. Done, Bella said. Her phone buzzed. The video file arrived. Now get out, Chloe said, draining her wine. I'm going to pack. Bella didn't hesitate. She ran from the house, clutching the backpack, her notebooks, and Medet's entire criminal enterprise. She jumped into the car. Stone Drive, she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. And get Mr. Thorne on the line, now. Tell him we've won. They didn't go to court. Justin's legal team, armed with the 15-year-old sketches, the laptop, and Chloe's video, didn't just have a silver bullet. They had a nuclear arsenal. They arranged a mediation at the offices of Covington and Burling, Medet's own high-powered law firm. Medet arrived tanned from Cabo, looking arrogant and victorious. He clearly had no idea Chloe had flipped. He sat at the long, polished table, flanked by his lawyers, a smirk on his face. Bella Justin, he said, nodding. Glad you've come to your senses. My offer is simple. 50% of the Portland project's profits and a public apology from you. He pointed at Bella, for your little stunt at the gala. Justin's lead lawyer, a sharp woman named Harriet, just smiled. We have no intention of accepting your offer, Mr. Sterling. We are, however, here to present our counter. Counter? Medet laughed. You have nothing. We have this, Harriet said. She slid a tablet across the table. It's a video. From your fiancée, Miss Jensen. We'd prefer to watch it together. She pressed play. The conference room was filled with Medet's own drunken voice. I'll tell them I gave her the ideas. She's nothing without me. Medet's tan vanished. His face went a pasty, sickly white. His lawyers, who had looked so confident, were now staring at him in open horror. That's deep-faked, Medet stammered. She's a psycho. You can't... We also have this... Harriet continued, placing Bella's childhood scrapbook on the table, open to the city in a garden sketch. Dated 2008. Your intellectual property claim appears to be off by about 11 years. And finally, Harriet said, we have this. She slid the second laptop across the table. "Which you reported stolen from your home 2 nights ago. An anonymous good citizen found it and turned it over to us. We in turn passed its contents on to the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office. They found your ledgers to be fascinating reading." One of Medet's lawyers stood up abruptly, his face pale. "This meeting is over. We—" "Sit down," Harriet commanded, her voice like ice. "It is over. Here's what happens now. You are going to sign this document dropping your lawsuit, forfeiting any and all claims against Ms. Hayes, and signing a permanent ironclad NDA. You will never speak her name or Mr. Thorne's in public or private again." "And if I don't?" Medet whispered, his bravado gone, replaced by the shaky fear of a cornered animal. "If you don't." Justin spoke for the first time, his voice a low, deadly calm. "I will personally fund the class action lawsuit for every client you've ever stolen from. I will buy the firm you work for and fire you. And Bella will sue you for defamation, perjury, and emotional distress for so much money your grandchildren will be in debt. But none of that really matters." Right on cue, the glass doors to the conference room opened. 2 uniformed Seattle police officers and 2 men in dark suits, FBI, walked in. "Medet Sterling," one of the agents said. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and embezzlement." Medet looked at Bella, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked at Justin. He was completely, utterly broken. Bella stood up as they cuffed him. She felt nothing. Not hatred, not pity, not even joy. Just quiet. It was finally truly over. She walked out of the conference room, Justin's hand on the small of her back. She didn't look back. 2 weeks later, Bella was standing in her penthouse studio. The Portland project was back on fast-tracked. Her name was cleared and her reputation was stronger than ever. Chloe was as promised on a beach in Sydney, her testimony given via deposition. Bella was looking at a new set of blueprints. The ones Justin had rescued from the rain-soaked street. The cliffside house. The elevator dinged. Justin walked in holding 2 glasses of champagne. He looked relaxed, the lingering fury of the last few months finally gone from his eyes. He handed her a glass. "A toast. To the future." "To the future," she agreed, clinking her glass against his. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the Olympic mountains in shades of purple and gold. "It's not just an executive housing package, is it?" Bella asked softly. Justin smiled, that old familiar treehouse smile. "No, it wasn't. You called it home, that day, in the rain." "I did," he said. He set his glass down and turned to face her. "For 15 years, home wasn't a place for me, Ellie. It was the memory of you. The memory of that treehouse, of that girl who dreamed of building cities and gardens. I built all of this." He gestured to the city below. "Just to get back to that. Just to get back to you." He gently took her glass and set it down. He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbones. Is it home, Bella?" he asked, his voice vulnerable. "Or is it just another gilded cage?" Bella leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. She felt no fear, no obligation, no control. She just felt right. "You're not my boss," she whispered, "and you're not my savior." She opened her eyes, her gaze clear and strong. "You're my partner, Justin, in all of it." She rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't a desperate, needy kiss. It was a kiss of arrival. It was a promise. It was 15 years of waiting, of pain, of building, all melting away in a single perfect moment. He kissed her back, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her close. It was a kiss that sealed the past and opened the door to the future. "Welcome home, Ellie," he murmured against her lips. "Welcome home, Justin," she replied. And that's the story of Bella Hayes. She walked away from a divorce with nothing but a box of broken dreams, only to find that her oldest friend had built her an empire. But this story isn't just about a billionaire's rescue. It's about a woman who had her talent, her identity, and her power stolen from her, and who had the courage to take it all back. It proves that the past, no matter how painful, can hold the keys to your future, and that the people who truly see you will never try to make you smaller. Bella thought she'd lost everything, but she just needed to find the person who remembered who she always was. What did you think of Midet's ultimate takedown? Was Chloe's betrayal justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and second chances, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs a story of hope, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama every single week. We've got so many more stories to tell.
Jennifer Matthews stood in the rain outside the mansion she'd called home for 8 years, her 3-year-old triplets clinging to her soaked coat, while her husband Brandon and his entire family threw garbage bags filled with her belongings onto the driveway, completely unaware that just 4 hours earlier, she had signed the biggest infrastructure contract in state history, worth $450 million. But Brandon's mistress Vanessa was laughing from the doorway, her hand possessively wrapped around his waist, while his mother Patricia sneered that Jennifer was nothing but a worthless burden who couldn't even afford decent clothes for those 3 little accidents. And his sister Melissa filmed the whole humiliating scene for social media, mocking how Jennifer would end up begging on the streets with her triplets because she had no skills, no money, and no future. The contract documents were still in Jennifer's car, the titanium-reinforced vehicle design she'd spent 6 years perfecting in the garage they'd forbidden her from using. The revolutionary blueprint that 7 countries were now fighting to license. The innovation that would rebuild the entire Pacific Northwest's transportation infrastructure. But her husband and his family were too busy celebrating her destruction to notice the government official's Range Rover that had been parked across the street for the past 20 minutes. What would Brandon's face look like when he discovered the woman he'd just thrown away like trash was now the most sought-after engineer in North America? How would Vanessa's laughter sound when she realized the worthless wife she'd replaced was about to become wealthier than Brandon's entire family combined? And what would Patricia and Melissa do when they understood that the woman they just humiliated on camera would soon be deciding whether their family business received the supply contracts that could save them from bankruptcy? Jennifer's hands trembled as she buckled Emma, Olivia, and Sophie into their car seats, her daughter's confused faces breaking her heart into smaller pieces than she thought possible. The rain hammered against the windshield, mixing with tears she refused to let fall until her babies couldn't see. Brandon's voice still echoed in her ears from 30 minutes ago, when he'd walked into their bedroom with Vanessa draped on his arm and announced that Jennifer had exactly 1 hour to leave his house. His house, the mansion she'd helped purchase with her grandfather's inheritance before Brandon's tech startup had crashed spectacularly, losing every investor's money and leaving him scrambling to save face in Silicon Valley's ruthless social circles. The home where she'd sacrificed her engineering career to raise their daughters after a complicated pregnancy had left her bedridden for months. The place where his mother Patricia had moved in 2 years ago, gradually poisoning every conversation with remarks about Jennifer's inability to lose the baby weight, her failure to maintain proper society connections, her embarrassing habit of sketching vehicle designs on napkins during family dinners. Jennifer had watched her husband transform from the ambitious entrepreneur she'd married into a hollow man who measured his worth by his mother's approval ratings and his mistress's Instagram followers. Vanessa worked at his mother's real estate firm, a 26-year-old with perfect highlights and a talent for making Jennifer feel invisible in her own home. The affair had been obvious for 8 months, but Jennifer had stayed silent, focusing instead on the project that consumed her nights after the triplets finally slept. The garage had become her sanctuary, the place where she'd rebuilt herself bolt by bolt. Her background in aerospace engineering and materials science had seemed like a waste during those years of changing diapers and attending playdates, but every skill had been sharpening in the darkness, waiting for the right application. The titanium-reinforced chassis design had started as a sketch on the back of Sophie's pediatrician bill, an innovation that could revolutionize how cities approach public transportation infrastructure in earthquake zones. She'd submitted the preliminary designs to the Department of Transportation 18 months ago under her maiden name, Bennett, never mentioning it to Brandon because his last 3 business ventures had imploded after he'd overpromised and underdelivered to investors who'd expected miracles. This was hers, something he couldn't touch or diminish or claim credit for during cocktail parties where he rewrote history to make his failures sound like strategic pivots. The government response had been immediate and enthusiastic. Jennifer had spent the past year and a half in clandestine meetings with federal engineers, transportation secretaries, and military advisors who understood that her design wasn't just innovative, it was revolutionary. The titanium composite framework could withstand seismic activity that would crumble traditional infrastructure, while the modular construction system reduced building time by 60% and cost by 40% compared to current methods. 3 countries had contacted her within weeks of her presenting to the International Engineering Summit last fall. Japan wanted her designs for their coastal cities. New Zealand needed earthquake-resistant solutions for Wellington's transportation overhaul. Chile's government had sent a delegation to her hotel room with contracts that made her head spin. But the United States had ultimately won the bidding war, offering her the Pacific Northwest Infrastructure Modernization Project, a contract worth $450 million over 8 years, with her firm taking the lead design and oversight role. She'd signed the final documents that morning in a Seattle conference room surrounded by senators, military generals, and the governor himself. The champagne had been expensive, the handshakes firm, the future impossibly bright. Jennifer Bennett Matthews was now the principal engineer and project director for the largest infrastructure overhaul in West Coast history. The contract specified that her company, Bennett Engineering Solutions, established just 6 weeks ago with paperwork filed under her maiden name, would receive an immediate advance payment of $45 million to establish headquarters and begin hiring the team of specialists the project required. The wire transfer would hit her new business account within 72 hours. Jennifer had driven home from Seattle with her phone exploding with congratulatory messages from colleagues she hadn't spoken to in years. Job applications from engineers who wanted to work under her leadership, and interview requests from networks that wanted to feature the woman who designed the future. She'd imagined telling Brandon over a quiet dinner, watching his face transform with pride, perhaps finally earning Patricia's grudging respect for accomplishing something substantial. Instead, she'd walked into her bedroom to find Vanessa modeling lingerie she'd bought with Brandon's credit card, while his sister Melissa filmed reaction videos for her social media followers. Patricia had been sitting on Jennifer's bed, casually explaining that Brandon had finally found a real woman who understood how to support a man's ambitions, unlike Jennifer, who'd let herself go and wasted her education playing housewife to 3 demanding children. Brandon had barely looked at Jennifer when he delivered his prepared speech. The marriage was over, had been over for years if she was honest with herself. Vanessa made him feel alive again, made him remember who he was before responsibilities and screaming babies had drained his potential. Patricia's real estate firm had a position waiting for him, a fresh start where he could rebuild his reputation. Jennifer could have the car and whatever clothes fit in garbage bags, but everything else belonged to him because his name was on the mortgage documents. Melissa had laughed when Jennifer asked about the triplets, suggesting that maybe this was the universe's way of teaching Jennifer that some women weren't meant to be mothers and career women simultaneously. Vanessa had added that the girls would probably benefit from a father who wasn't constantly exhausted from a wife's emotional demands, that maybe Brandon could actually focus on his daughters once Jennifer's negative energy was removed from the equation. Jennifer had packed in silence, her mind calculating trajectories and consequences, while her hands folded tiny clothes and gathered favorite stuffed animals. She'd taken the contract documents from her car's glove compartment and hidden them inside Emma's diaper bag, knowing that Brandon never touched anything related to childcare. She'd watched Patricia supervise the garbage bag packing, making sure Jennifer didn't steal any valuable jewelry or artwork that had been Patterson family heirlooms. The cruelty had been methodical and complete, designed to break her spirit and ensure she understood her worthlessness in their hierarchy. Melissa's phone had captured every moment, every tear Jennifer had fought to suppress, every humiliating second of her standing in the rain while Vanessa laughed about how the mighty had fallen. But none of them had noticed the government vehicle parked across the street, the dark Range Rover with federal plates and tinted windows. None of them had recognized Deputy Director Morrison from the Department of Transportation, who'd insisted on providing security for his newest contractor, given the sensitive nature of the project and the international attention it would attract. None of them understood that the bedraggled woman they were destroying on camera was now more valuable to national infrastructure than their entire social circle combined. Jennifer started the car, her titanium-reinforced vehicle prototype that she'd been testing for 6 months without Brandon noticing anything unusual about the sedan he dismissed as her boring mom car. The engine purred with power that defied its modest exterior, the chassis absorbing the road's imperfections with technology that would soon revolutionize transportation worldwide. She pulled away from the mansion slowly, watching it disappear in her rearview mirror while her daughters sang nursery rhymes in the back seat, blissfully unaware that their world had just shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. The hotel suite she'd reserved that morning overlooked Puget Sound, a temporary home while she searched for the right property to establish both Bennett Engineering Solutions headquarters and a real home for her daughters. The $45 million advance would cover everything, from hiring the industry's best engineers to creating the childcare facility she'd need for Emma, Olivia, and Sophie during the intense work years ahead. Her phone vibrated with another message from Deputy Director Morrison, confirming that tomorrow's press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. The governor wanted to personally announce the contract award, emphasizing the administration's commitment to infrastructure innovation and highlighting Jennifer's groundbreaking work. Networks were already requesting interviews. Engineering journals wanted exclusive features. Universities were offering research partnerships and guest lecture opportunities. Brandon's world was about to implode in ways his limited imagination couldn't begin to comprehend. Patricia's real estate firm was already struggling, hemorrhaging clients to newer agencies with better technology and more aggressive marketing. The company desperately needed the commercial supply contracts that came with major government infrastructure projects, the relationships that could transform a dying business into a regional powerhouse. Those contracts were now Jennifer's to award or withhold, her decisions determining which suppliers would profit from 8 years of continuous construction work across 6 states. Melissa's social media empire was built on lifestyle content and family connections, her followers believing she had insider access to Seattle's elite business circles. The video she just posted of Jennifer's humiliation would become Melissa's nightmare within days, the permanent evidence of how the Patterson family had treated the engineer who'd become Washington State's most valuable infrastructure asset. Vanessa would discover that the worthless wife she'd replaced had been worth more than Brandon's entire failed career. That the woman she'd mocked for sketching designs at family dinners had been creating the innovation that 7 countries wanted to license. Brandon would understand too late that he'd discarded a partner worth hundreds of millions for a mistress whose primary skill was social media photography and a mother whose approval meant nothing in the world of engineering excellence. Jennifer tucked the triplets into the hotel suite's king-sized bed, their small bodies finally relaxed after the chaos of the evening. Emma clutched her stuffed elephant, Olivia had found her thumb, and Sophie was already snoring softly. They would adapt and thrive because children were resilient, and Jennifer would make absolutely certain they grew up understanding their worth had nothing to do with other people's limited vision. Tomorrow's press conference would destroy Brandon's world systematically and completely. But tonight, Jennifer allowed herself to feel everything, the grief and rage and satisfaction, mixing into something she didn't have words for yet. Something that tasted like justice and felt like freedom and looked like the future she'd built in secret while they'd called her worthless. Brandon Patterson woke up to 73 missed calls and his phone vibrating so aggressively it had fallen off the nightstand. Vanessa stirred beside him, her blonde hair spread across the pillow that had been Jennifer's for 8 years, her perfectly manicured hand reaching for his chest with the possessiveness of victory. His mother's voice was shrieking from the hallway before he could check the notifications. Patricia's fury so palpable, it seemed to shake the mansion's foundation. The first message was from his former business partner from the failed tech startup, the man who'd sworn never to speak to Brandon again after the investor disaster. The text was simple and devastating. "Dude, did you seriously just kick out Jennifer Bennett? The Jennifer Bennett? Are you completely insane?" Brandon's confusion lasted exactly 4 more seconds, until he opened the news alert that had crashed his phone's notification system. The Seattle Times headline dominated his screen with a photograph that made his stomach drop into places stomachs shouldn't reach. Jennifer standing between the governor and 3 military generals, her hand shaking the Secretary of Transportation's grip, her smile confident and radiant, her eyes sparkling with achievement. Local engineer Jennifer Bennett awarded $450 million Pacific Northwest infrastructure contract, revolutionary titanium design to transform regional transportation. The article detailed everything: 6 years of secret development work, international bidding wars, 7 countries competing for licensing rights, a preliminary advance payment of $45 million. Bennett Engineering Solutions, established 6 weeks ago, with headquarters soon to be announced in the Seattle metropolitan area. The project would create 8,000 jobs over 8 years, revolutionize earthquake-resistant infrastructure design, and position the Pacific Northwest as the global leader in next-generation transportation innovation. There were quotes from engineering professors who'd taught Jennifer at MIT, colleagues who'd recognized her genius before she disappeared into marriage and motherhood, government officials praising her meticulous attention to safety standards and cost efficiency. The governor had used words like visionary and transformational and the future of American infrastructure innovation. The photographs showed Jennifer in a tailored navy suit that Brandon had never seen, her hair styled professionally, her posture radiating authority and competence. She looked like someone who'd been hiding in plain sight, someone who'd been extraordinary all along, while he'd been too blind and stupid to notice. This wasn't the exhausted woman he'd mocked for sketching on napkins. This was Jennifer Bennett, the engineer whose designs were about to change how cities approach transportation infrastructure in seismically active regions. Brandon's hands shook as he scrolled through more articles. Forbes was already calculating her potential net worth, estimating that licensing deals alone could push her into billionaire territory within 5 years. The Wall Street Journal had published a profile of her journey from aerospace engineering to infrastructure innovation. Engineering Weekly had interviewed former professors who'd predicted Jennifer would revolutionize the field if she ever returned to it full-time. Vanessa had woken up now, her confusion transforming into horror as she read over his shoulder. Patricia burst into the bedroom without knocking, her face twisted with rage and panic, her phone showing the same headlines that were destroying Brandon's understanding of reality. Melissa was crying in the hallway, her social media notifications exploding with comments about the video she'd posted last night. Thousands of people calling her cruel and short-sighted and asking how she could humiliate an engineering genius on camera. "Fix this," Patricia hissed, her voice venomous with desperation. "Call her. Apologize. Tell her it was a mistake, that you were stressed, that we didn't mean any of it. Brandon, my company needs those supply contracts. The infrastructure project will require commercial real estate services, construction supply chains, logistics coordination. If Jennifer blacklists us, we're finished. Do you understand? Finished." Brandon tried calling Jennifer's number. It went straight to an automated message informing him that this number was no longer in service. He tried her email only to discover she'd changed her address to something associated with Bennett Engineering Solutions. He checked social media accounts that no longer existed, realizing Jennifer had systematically erased every connection to her married identity. His sister Melissa had deleted the humiliation video, but it was too late. Screenshots and recordings had spread across multiple platforms, picked up by news outlets covering the contract story. The comments were brutal and specific. People were identifying Patricia's real estate firm, calling for boycotts and investigation into how the Patterson family treated women. Melissa's sponsors were dropping her, brands distancing themselves from someone who'd filmed cruelty toward a woman now celebrated as an infrastructure hero. The doorbell rang at 7:30, a sound that made Brandon's blood freeze. Deputy Director Morrison stood on the porch with two federal agents, their expressions professionally neutral, but their purpose unmistakable. Morrison held a tablet showing the video Melissa had posted, the footage of Jennifer standing in the rain with her triplets, while Vanessa laughed and Patricia sneered. "Mr. Patterson," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority, "I'm here in an unofficial capacity this morning to inform you that Dr. Bennett has requested a restraining order preventing any member of your family from contacting her or her daughters. Given the sensitive nature of her current government contracts and the security clearances involved, this request will be granted immediately. Any attempt to contact Dr. Bennett will be considered a federal violation." Brandon tried to speak, but Morrison held up a hand. "I watched that video last night from across the street, Mr. Patterson. I watched you and your family humiliate one of the most brilliant engineers I've encountered in 30 years of government service. Dr. Bennett specifically requested that I deliver this message personally. She has no interest in revenge because success is the best response to cruelty. But she wants you to understand that the life you threw away last night was worth more than you'll ever achieve." Morrison turned to Patricia, his expression hardening. "Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Bennett has also instructed all project contractors to exclude Patterson Real Estate from any consideration for supply chain partnerships or commercial service agreements associated with the Pacific Northwest Infrastructure Project. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Good morning." The federal agents left, their departure creating a vacuum of silence so complete that Brandon could hear his mother's breathing, sharp and panicked. Vanessa had retreated to the bathroom, her earlier confidence evaporated into the recognition that she'd helped destroy something irreplaceable for a relationship that now felt hollow and temporary. Brandon walked through the house in a daze, seeing it with new eyes. The garage he'd forbidden Jennifer from using had been her workshop, he realized now. The napkin sketches he'd mocked had been preliminary designs for innovations worth hundreds of millions. The late nights he'd complained about had been Jennifer teaching herself advanced materials, science and seismic engineering, while he'd scrolled through social media feeling sorry for himself. His phone continued erupting with messages from people he'd lost contact with over the years. Former colleagues from the failed startup were asking if he was the same Brandon Patterson who just divorced Jennifer Bennett. Investors he'd burned were pointing out the irony that he'd been married to someone actually capable of delivering revolutionary innovation while claiming to be a visionary himself. Friends from college wanted to know if the rumors were true, if he'd really kicked out the triplets in the rain, if he'd actually chosen his mother's approval and a mistress over a wife who'd been secretly building the future. The headlines kept coming throughout the morning. International engineering consortiums were announcing licensing partnerships with Bennett Engineering Solutions. 3 universities were offering Jennifer endowed professorships in research facilities. The governor had scheduled a second press conference to announce that Washington State was providing tax incentives to ensure Bennett Engineering Solutions headquarters remained in Seattle, creating a new hub for infrastructure innovation that would attract talent and investment for decades. By afternoon, Brandon understood the full scope of what he'd destroyed. The wife he'd called worthless was now worth more than his entire family's combined assets. The mother he'd dismissed as failing at parenthood was successfully raising 3 daughters while simultaneously revolutionizing infrastructure engineering. The woman he'd humiliated on camera was now being celebrated globally as a visionary whose work would literally reshape how cities were built. Patricia's real estate firm had lost 6 major clients by noon, companies unwilling to associate with a family that had treated Jennifer Bennett with such visible cruelty. Melissa had lost her primary sponsors and watched her follower count drop by 30,000 as people shared the video alongside articles about Jennifer's achievements. Vanessa had gone home to her apartment, suddenly uncomfortable living in a house Jennifer had helped purchase, suddenly aware that she'd become the other woman in a story where she was undeniably the villain. Brandon sat in the garage that evening, staring at the workbench where Jennifer had obviously spent countless hours. There were still pencil marks on the concrete floor, equations and diagrams that made no sense to him, but clearly represented years of dedicated effort. He found a folder hidden behind old paint cans, filled with rejection letters from investors who'd dismissed her designs as too ambitious. Encouragement notes she'd written to herself. Photographs of the triplets that she'd apparently looked at for motivation during difficult nights. One photograph stopped him cold. Jennifer was in this garage surrounded by design papers and engineering textbooks. Her laptop opened to complex modeling software. She looked exhausted and determined and absolutely certain of her path. The photo was dated 8 months ago, right around the time his affair with Vanessa had begun, right around the time he'd decided Jennifer was no longer worth his attention. She'd been building the future while he'd been destroying the present. She'd been working towards something revolutionary while he'd been working toward nothing but his mother's approval. She'd been sacrificing sleep and comfort to create innovations that would benefit millions while he'd been complaining that she didn't pay enough attention to his needs. The titanium-reinforced vehicle she'd driven away in suddenly made sense. She'd been testing her own designs, perfecting her innovations, using her daily life as the laboratory. The boring mom car he'd mocked had been a prototype for technology that would transform transportation infrastructure worldwide. Jennifer had been extraordinary all along, and he'd been too small-minded to see it. His phone buzzed with one final message, this one from a reporter asking if he wanted to comment on his ex-wife's success. Brandon stared at the question, understanding that any response he gave would be inadequate and self-serving. What could he possibly say? That he'd been wrong? That he'd confused quietness with worthlessness? That he'd mistaken sacrifice for failure? The truth was simpler and more devastating. Jennifer had been playing chess while he'd been playing checkers, building an empire while he'd been building nothing, becoming someone extraordinary while he'd been becoming someone forgettable. And he'd thrown her away like garbage, never suspecting that he was discarding the only genuinely valuable thing in his entire life. Jennifer stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office, watching construction crews break ground on Bennett Engineering Solutions headquarters. The building would be a showcase for her innovations, featuring the titanium-reinforced design elements that had won her the government contract, earthquake-resistant technology that would make it one of the safest structures in the Pacific Northwest. The architectural firm had proposed something traditional, but Jennifer had insisted on creating something that demonstrated her vision for the future of urban construction. 3 weeks had passed since that rainy night outside Brandon's mansion. 3 weeks that had transformed her existence so completely that her old life felt like someone else's story. The triplets were thriving in their new home, a sprawling property in Bellevue with enough space for them to run and play without bothering anyone. She'd hired 2 nannies who specialized in early childhood development, women who treated her daughters with genuine affection, rather than the barely concealed irritation Patricia had always shown. Emma, Olivia, and Sophie were adjusting remarkably well to their new circumstances. They asked about their father occasionally, but Jennifer had explained gently that sometimes families change shape, and that was okay because love didn't disappear just because living situations shifted. The court-ordered restraining order ensured Brandon couldn't disrupt their stability with inconsistent parenting or confusing messages about where they belonged. The preliminary team Jennifer had assembled for the infrastructure project read like a dream roster of engineering talent. She'd recruited specialists from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech, offering salaries and research budgets that made academic positions look like charity work. The government advance had allowed her to be aggressive in talent acquisition, and engineers who'd been languishing in corporate positions were jumping at the opportunity to work on innovations that would actually matter. Dr. Patricia Kim had been her first hire, a materials science expert who'd been stuck teaching undergraduate classes despite publishing groundbreaking research on composite structures. Dr. Robert Chang had abandoned a consulting career that paid ridiculous money but provided zero intellectual satisfaction to join Jennifer's team as lead structural engineer. The roster continued growing daily. Brilliant minds who understood that Bennett Engineering Solutions wasn't just another firm, but rather a chance to reshape infrastructure design fundamentally. The licensing deals had exceeded even Jennifer's optimistic projections. Japan had signed a 20-year agreement worth $80 million for rights to implement her seismic-resistant designs in Tokyo's transportation expansion. New Zealand had committed $50 million for the Wellington project. Chile, Peru, and Ecuador had formed a South American consortium offering $90 million for comprehensive licensing across the Pacific coastal regions. The intellectual property alone was generating wealth that would fund research and development for decades. Forbes had published their profile last week, featuring Jennifer on the cover, with a headline that made her laugh. The engineer they underestimated, how Jennifer Bennett built an infrastructure empire while her husband looked elsewhere. The article had been fair and thorough, interviewing colleagues who'd known her at MIT, professors who'd recognized her potential, and government officials who'd championed her contract bid. There had been tasteful mention of her divorce in the viral video, but the focus had remained firmly on her achievements rather than her personal drama. The interview requests had been overwhelming. Good Morning America wanted her for a full segment. 60 Minutes was proposing a profile on women in engineering who'd overcome adversity to achieve breakthrough success. TED had invited her to deliver a talk at their next conference about innovation born from necessity. Jennifer had accepted selectively, understanding that media presence was part of building Bennett Engineering Solutions brand recognition, but also aware that her primary obligation was to the work itself. Her phone buzzed with a message from Deputy Director Morrison confirming that tomorrow's site inspection in Portland would include senators from Oregon and Washington who wanted to understand the project's scope. Jennifer appreciated Morrison's steady presence throughout these chaotic weeks, his matter-of-fact approach to security concerns and political considerations. He'd become an unexpected ally, someone who understood that Jennifer's primary interest was engineering excellence rather than bureaucratic posturing. The triplets burst into her office at 6 o'clock, their nannies apologizing for the intrusion, but Jennifer waving them off with a laugh. Emma had drawn a picture of their new house, complete with the engineering-themed playground Jennifer had commissioned for the backyard. Olivia wanted to show off her counting skills, racing through numbers while her sisters cheered. Sophie had questions about the construction equipment outside, her 3-year-old curiosity already gravitating toward the machines and structures that shape the world. Jennifer gathered her daughters close, breathing in their shampoo-scented hair and feeling gratitude so intense it bordered on painful. These babies were the reason she'd persevered through those years of diminishment and dismissal. They were why she'd stayed up late perfecting designs instead of confronting Brandon about his obvious affair. They were the motivation behind every equation she'd solved and every innovation she'd tested. Brandon had tried contacting her through intermediaries twice in the past 3 weeks, messages that Jennifer had ignored systematically and completely. His mother, Patricia, had sent a letter that Jennifer's lawyer had returned unopened, understanding that nothing the Patterson family had to say would be worth the emotional energy required to process it. Melissa had attempted a public apology via social media, a transparent attempt to salvage her influencer career that had been met with mockery and disbelief. Vanessa had apparently moved out of the mansion, according to reports Jennifer had heard secondhand through mutual acquaintances. The relationship between Brandon and his mistress had predictably deteriorated once the excitement of forbidden romance had faded into the reality of everyday existence. Jennifer felt no satisfaction from this news, only a distant recognition that temporary attractions rarely survived exposure to real life. The press conference where the governor announced her contract had been Jennifer's moment of complete vindication, but she'd discovered something interesting about revenge in the aftermath. The satisfaction was fleeting and hollow compared to the genuine fulfillment of doing work she loved, with people who respected her abilities. Watching Brandon's world crumble had been briefly gratifying, but building her own empire was infinitely more rewarding. Her legal team had been thorough about protecting her interests and her daughter's futures. The divorce settlement had been surprisingly straightforward once Brandon's lawyers understood they had no leverage and significant liability exposure. Jennifer had kept her inheritance, her vehicle prototype, and her intellectual property. Brandon had kept the mansion with its mortgage and memories. The child support agreement was generous but firm, with strict visitation schedules that prevented him from disrupting the triplets' stability. Jennifer's personal wealth had crossed into territory she'd never imagined during those years of changing diapers and attending playdates. The contract payments, licensing deals, and equity in Bennett Engineering Solutions combined to create a net worth that financial advisors kept revising upward. She'd established trust funds for Emma, Olivia and Sophie, that would guarantee their educations and opportunities regardless of what happened in the future. But money had never been Jennifer's primary motivator, despite what Brandon and his family had apparently believed. The work itself was what drove her, the satisfaction of solving complex problems that had stumped other engineers. The thrill of seeing her designs transform from sketches into structures that would serve communities for generations. The infrastructure project would be her legacy, physical proof that innovation could come from unexpected places and that determination could overcome dismissal. The titanium-reinforced chassis design was already being studied by engineering programs worldwide. Jennifer's methodology becoming required reading in graduate-level courses focused on seismic-resistant construction. She'd been invited to lecture at MIT next semester, returning to her alma mater as a visiting professor who'd proven that maternal sacrifice and professional achievement weren't mutually exclusive categories. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. The Portland site inspection would be followed by meetings with transportation officials from California and British Columbia, both interested in expanding the project's scope beyond the original 6-state parameters. Jennifer's team had prepared comprehensive presentations demonstrating how the design could be adapted for different geographical and seismic conditions without compromising structural integrity. But tonight belonged to her daughters, to the bedtime routine that grounded Jennifer no matter how chaotic her professional life became. She read them stories about brave women who changed the world through determination and creativity, carefully selected books that emphasized intelligence and perseverance over appearance and compliance. Emma, Olivia, and Sophie would grow up understanding that their worth was intrinsic and that other people's limited vision was never their problem. Jennifer tucked them in one by one, kissing foreheads and adjusting blankets, and promising that tomorrow they'd visit the Children's Museum before her afternoon meetings. Their room in the Bellevue house was filled with natural light and educational toys, a space designed to nurture their curiosity rather than contain their energy. They were safe and loved and valued, everything Jennifer had needed to ensure before she could fully embrace her professional success. She returned to her home office afterward, reviewing design modifications for the Seattle transportation hub that would serve as the project's showcase. The blueprints spread across her desk represented thousands of hours of work, countless revisions and improvements, the accumulated expertise of Jennifer's entire career, distilled into innovations that would literally change how cities approached infrastructure in seismically active regions. Her phone showed text messages from team members sharing excitement about tomorrow's presentations, engineers who understood they were participating in something historically significant. Jennifer responded to each one thoughtfully, building the collaborative culture that would define Bennett Engineering Solutions for years to come. She'd learned from Brandon's failed startup that technical innovation meant nothing without team cohesion and mutual respect. The video of her humiliation had disappeared from most platforms, deleted by Melissa and removed by moderators responding to copyright claims and harassment concerns. But Jennifer had saved a copy on an encrypted drive, not for revenge, but as a reminder of where she'd come from and how far she'd traveled. On difficult days, she'd watch those 30 seconds of rain and garbage bags and Vanessa's laughter, letting the memory fuel her determination to prove that cruelty was temporary, but achievement was permanent. Brandon would live with his choices forever, understanding too late that he'd traded substance for appearance and excellence for mediocrity. Patricia would watch her real estate firm struggle without the infrastructure contracts that could have saved it, knowing she'd prioritize status over recognizing genuine worth. Melissa would rebuild her social media presence eventually, but always with the shadow of that video haunting her engagement metrics. Vanessa would move forward with the recognition that she'd been part of destroying something valuable for something temporary. Jennifer felt no anger toward any of them anymore, only a distant pity for people who'd confused quietness with weakness and sacrifice with failure. They'd given her the greatest gift possible even though they'd intended cruelty. They'd forced her to rebuild herself into someone stronger and more capable than she'd ever been while trying to please them. The future stretched ahead with opportunities that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. International partnerships were forming, research grants were being offered, Speaking invitations were accumulating from organizations that understood Jennifer represented something larger than just engineering achievement. She was proof that women could disappear into motherhood and marriage without losing the essence of who they were, that dormant skills could reawaken when given the right opportunity, that dismissal from small-minded people meant absolutely nothing in the larger context of capability and determination. 6 months later, Brandon stood outside the construction site where Jennifer's innovations were transforming downtown Seattle's transportation infrastructure. The titanium-reinforced framework rose against the skyline like a monument to everything he'd failed to see in his wife. Each beam and girder representing technology he dismissed as napkin sketches and garage hobbies. Workers moved with purpose across the site, their hard hats bearing the Bennett Engineering Solutions logo that was rapidly becoming synonymous with revolutionary infrastructure design. He'd come here without really understanding why, drawn by some masochistic need to witness what he'd lost. Jennifer's success had become impossible to avoid even when Brandon tried to ignore it. Her face appeared regularly in business publications and engineering journals. Her company was hiring aggressively, offering opportunities that made talented engineers abandon established careers. The Bennett name was becoming legendary in infrastructure circles, while the Patterson name was becoming a cautionary tale about underestimating the people closest to you. The mansion he'd kept in the divorce was hemorrhaging value, its association with the viral video making it toxic to potential buyers. Patricia's real estate firm had been forced to merge with a competitor after losing too many clients who wanted no connection to the family that had humiliated an engineering genius on camera. Melissa had abandoned social media entirely, taking a corporate communications position that paid a fraction of what her influencer career had generated during its peak. Vanessa had disappeared from his life 3 months ago, their relationship disintegrating once the excitement of forbidden romance had faded into the banality of everyday existence. She'd returned the expensive jewelry he'd bought during their affair, her note explaining that she couldn't live with herself knowing she'd participated in destroying a family. Brandon had read that note 17 times, searching for absolution that didn't exist within its careful sentences. His attempts to see Emma, Olivia, and Sophie had been limited to supervised visitation in locations where court-appointed monitors ensured he didn't attempt to poison his daughters against their mother. The triplets were polite but distant during these visits, their questions about his life perfunctory, their attention wandering toward activities that didn't involve him. They talked constantly about their new house, in their new school, in the engineering toys their mother bought them that turned physics into play. Jennifer had ensured the girls knew they were loved, that their father's absence was about his choices rather than their worth. She'd apparently never spoken negatively about Brandon in their presence, a grace he didn't deserve and couldn't reciprocate because he had nothing positive to say about his own decisions. The girls were thriving according to reports from their teachers and pediatrician, adjusted and happy and secure in ways they'd never been during those chaotic years in the mansion. Brandon's mother had stopped speaking to him entirely after the financial implications of their treatment of Jennifer had become undeniable. Patricia blamed Brandon for not controlling his wife better, for not recognizing her potential and either supporting it or suppressing it before it could threaten the family's social standing. The logic was twisted and self-serving, but that was Patricia's specialty, rewriting reality to avoid accepting responsibility for her own cruelty. Professional opportunities had evaporated once Brandon's connection to Jennifer's story became widely known. The tech community was small and gossipy, and everyone now understood that Brandon Patterson was the man who'd thrown away a brilliant engineer for his mother's approval and a younger woman's attention. Investors who'd considered funding his new startup ideas had withdrawn after discovering his identity. Colleagues who'd been willing to collaborate suddenly had scheduling conflicts that lasted indefinitely. He'd finally gotten a job 3 weeks ago, a mid-level position at a software company where nobody knew his history and his unremarkable skills were sufficient for unremarkable work. The salary covered his mortgage and basic expenses, but provided none of the lifestyle he'd convinced himself he deserved. Brandon ate lunch alone in his cubicle, afraid that conversation with coworkers would eventually reveal who he was and what he'd done. The construction site foreman noticed Brandon standing at the fence, his suspicion obvious even at a distance. Security had probably been briefed about Jennifer's ex-husband, warned that he might attempt contact or disruption. Brandon raised his hands in a gesture of peace and backed away, understanding that he no longer had any place in Jennifer's world, not even as a spectator to her achievements. He drafted apology letters that he'd never sent, knowing that no combination of words could undo the cruelty of that rainy night or erase the years of dismissal that had preceded it. Jennifer had made it clear through her lawyers that she had no interest in communication that didn't pertain to the triplets' welfare and education. She'd moved forward completely, building a life so full and purposeful that his absence probably registered as relief rather than loss. Sometimes Brandon let himself imagine alternative timelines where he'd supported Jennifer's engineering work instead of mocking it, where he'd recognized her sacrifice instead of resenting her exhaustion, where he'd chosen his family over his mother's approval. In those imaginary scenarios, he was the husband celebrating beside Jennifer at press conferences, the father proudly telling strangers that his wife had revolutionized infrastructure design, the partner who'd been smart enough to recognize extraordinary when it was sleeping beside him every night. But those timelines existed only in Brandon's regretful imagination, alternative realities that couldn't compete with the actual history he'd created through his choices. He'd prioritized all the wrong things and lost everything that actually mattered. Jennifer had survived his cruelty and transformed it into fuel for achievement that would outlast his entire existence. She'd proven that the people who dismiss you are never the ones who determine your worth, that talent combined with determination could overcome even the most complete forms of betrayal. Brandon walked back to his modest apartment in a building with thin walls and cheaper rent, passing homeless people who might have been him if Jennifer hadn't been generous in the divorce settlement. She could have destroyed him financially and legally if she'd wanted revenge, but instead she'd simply moved forward as though he'd never mattered enough to waste energy punishing. That indifference hurt worse than active hatred would have. The recognition that he'd become irrelevant to the woman he'd tried to make feel worthless. His phone contained no messages because there was nobody left who wanted to talk to him. His mother was done, his sister was ashamed, his ex-girlfriend wanted nothing to do with him, and his former friends had discovered they'd never really liked him that much anyway. The isolation was complete and self-inflicted. Consequences that Brandon had earned through decisions he couldn't undo, no matter how desperately he wished otherwise. The news that evening featured a segment on Jennifer's upcoming TED Talk about innovation and perseverance. Promotional footage showing her confident presence on the famous red circle. The interviewer asked about her divorce in the viral video, giving Jennifer the opportunity to discuss how cruelty had motivated her success. But Jennifer had simply smiled and redirected the conversation toward her team's achievements and the infrastructure project's potential impact on communities worldwide. "I don't spend much time thinking about the past," Jennifer had said, her voice warm and genuine. "My daughters and my work are what matter now. Everything else is just noise that doesn't deserve my attention or energy. Success really is the best response to people who underestimate you, not because it hurts them, but because it proves they were never important enough to slow you down." Brandon watched that interview 3 times, trying to read between the lines for some hint of residual feeling, some indication that Jennifer remembered him as anything other than an obstacle she'd overcome. But there was nothing, no bitterness or anger or longing, just the complete indifference of someone who'd moved so far forward that looking back required more effort than it was worth. The truth he'd been avoiding crystallized in that moment. Jennifer hadn't just survived his betrayal, she'd transcended it entirely. She'd built a life so fulfilling and purposeful that his presence or absence made no meaningful difference. She was raising their daughters with love and teaching them to value substance over appearance. She was changing how cities approached infrastructure in earthquake zones. She was mentoring young engineers and breaking down barriers for women in male-dominated fields. She was making a difference that would echo through generations. And Brandon was eating microwave dinners alone in a small apartment, working a job that bored him, living a life defined entirely by the moment he'd been too stupid to recognize what he had until it was walking away in the rain with garbage bags and 3 confused little girls. He'd become exactly what he'd accused Jennifer of being: worthless, purposeless, invisible to people who mattered. The story that had started with his cruelty had ended with his irrelevance, and there was nothing left to